Welcome back, everybody, to the Eagle's Nest, and we are going to bring you Turn 4 review in its entirety, what has happened this turn. And we'll start with, well, the usual. We'll start with Warsaw Pact and go from there in order on our developments. So here in Eastern Europe, we have a small or a few slight changes. We have the markers, task force markers, up there in the northern part of Europe done, and I'll get to that in a second. But down here, we have the bulk, if not all, of the Air Force redeployed in Europe here, or in Southern Europe. And you can see it's quite a bit. We have pretty much the entire Air Force strength stationed in Hungary and Romania, even in some of our Lend-Lease down here to Southern Yugoslavia. And all of these are designed to do one thing: strike terror in NATO. And what NATO has done in response is basically to evacuate Turkey, Greece, stockpile a lot of that stuff into Lazio, key junction point right now, as well as they've got their American task force fleet down here protecting the Mediterranean. But luckily for us, our allies, we have our Black Sea fleet, and hopefully that's a little bit of deterrent for NATO, but we'll have to wait and see. But definitely we might be seeing some naval battles here in the next turn or two, possibly in the Mediterranean. The battles in northern and southern Yugoslavia has been a stalemate ever since turn 1. Not much has been going on, but we'll see soon enough what happens maybe next turn. I won't give away any spoilers, but you'll have to sit around and watch. Now we'll just go over to this end of the board here and take a peek and look at what I've done here. We have our task force markers right here for Soviet Global Command. We have our Navy right here, which is in the Baltic Sea, as well as our Warsaw Pact Navy, which comprises the 3 submarines. And then we also have the Soviet Global Command. They've moved their forces up here into Eastern Germany, right there. And then we've got 2 large army groups. One of them in Germany, and one in Western Czechoslovakia, right near. And it's fun just to set these up here. You can get these plaques from Doug from Historical Board Gaming, but just to show you some strength here, and of course obviously NATO. I haven't had time or bothered to set anything else up for the NATO defending forces, but you can see right here they have their next-gen tanks. I'm short on paramilitary chips, but once again I kind of know where everything is. And then of course we got the beautiful US Navy over here, guarding the mouth to the Straits of Denmark. And we got the USS Kitty Hawk relieving the USS Abraham as she goes back for a refit. So she's another basically John F. Kennedy class aircraft carrier, or Kitty Hawk class carrier, but basically John F. K. and the USS Kitty Hawk are super carriers, but non-nuclear powered. So a little bit of fun here in Europe. Europe, you can see they got lots of anti-submarine helos floating about here, but obviously it's a sizable defense in Europe here, and even the Americans have brought in some reinforcements. They've taken their A-10s from Marmara and their A-10s, I think, and even an American fighter somewhere here to help reinforce forces in Europe. Slow and slightly, but they're not quite sure what Warsaw Pact is up to. Here in Sweden, we have, I think there was some carpet bombing in this area. We still have not been able to take this in southern Sweden, but this turn, the Soviets declared war in Finland and gobbled up the remaining places here, add a little bit more IPP to their books. Since Finland and Sweden are not part of NATO, it's there for with the free pickings. So that's been good for our alliance, for the Soviet alliance. or the Communist Alliance rather. But you can see we got attack helos there, air superiority fighters, and some more Air Force stuff. Some stuff has gone down to Angola, which is way down here, as part of one of their allies, and they got a defense treaty right there, but we won't really get into that. Just haven't had a lot of the resources to fully deck out the board as I usually like to. Now, after Soviet Global Command was done their turn, they redeployed some submarines down here. They got a Foxtrot and a Kula-class attack submarines down there in southern Europe. Obviously, posing a bit of threat. The Americans have to keep an eye on it. But the Americans' turn basically has destroyed or hampered a lot of PRF forces in in Latin America, to the point where there's very little right now. USS Carl Vinson and her task force has taken care of that, and they're pretty much mopping up any liberation of communism or communism liberation in the Nicaragua, Latin America, Guatemala area. But the Americans have deployed their Abram next-gen battle tanks up here to the East Coast. Obviously, they're going to probably do a sea lift or an airlift here, waiting to see what happens in Europe. And that's pretty much it. They did get the USS Mississippi out of mothballs, brought her in, as well as I think the Samuel B. Roberts and the Jack Williams here, a U.S. frigate, to help them deploy and muster up another minor navy, definitely probably heading into the Atlantic to either support the USS John F. Kennedy or the USS Kitty Hawk, or what other operations they might need. And right now, see what happens with the USS Carl Vinson, if she'll end up deployed into the Pacific or not. But those are kind of some of the major developments right now the Americans have had, or U.S. Global Command. We're going to cruise on over here to Soviet Far East Command, and we have a few more of these lovely task force markers right there. And you can see I've deployed them down here with basically their kind of army groups with next-gen tanks, main battle tanks, artillery, and so on. And you can see they have moved into Mongolia. Now, this is not entirely accurate. This is not Mongolian territory. When and or if the Far East Command does decide to attack China or vice versa, then Mongolia will sign a defense treaty. So it's probably just a matter of time. I just, once again, haven't had a lot of the pieces here, but just kind of symbolizes what the strength, or what some of the alliances are going to be once we go to war. Now, there's also forces in Vladivostok, so we have a little bit of a pincer movement here with some SAMs and whatnot, as well as the bulk of the force in eastern Mongolia, in Ulaanbaatar, or whichever that territory's name. But the Chinese have responded in kind, and we'll get to that in a second, with more deployment of forces here in southern Manchuria. But that has been some of their operations they've had here. But they've also declared war this turn on a lot of poor, unsuspecting nations, and have conquered those nations, specifically the Malaysian territories, Singapore, as well as the Philippines here are all under Soviet control. And as that has basically switched some alliances, so the Australians now are on board with the Americans, and same with the Japanese. Now, I've kept some of their sculpts and whatnot here. It's kind of fun just to see now what they have for assets. These are technically American assets, or their allies here in the Pacific. I like to call it SEATO, even though SEATO doesn't really exist in 1985, but kind of a little mini NATO of alliance forces here. And I believe even Hong Kong is part of that as well, possibly even a few other nations that I'm missing here. So the Americans are on alert, but basically what we can see here are the forces that have landed in Vietnam, or sorry, not Vietnam, in Malaysia, in their assault attack, Airborne Marines attack helos, and they are currently stationed in Malaysia, Singapore. And then over here in Vietnam, we had forces deployed into Cambodia here, and they've been slowly building up their forces with the help of the Vietnamese here, and it's a major junction in South Vietnam for for further conquest, and we'll have to see what the Far East Command has or wants to decide to do with their forces moving forward. We have a bunch of oil tankers been hit with one Kilo class diesel-electric submarine here and suffered some major casualties down here in the Indian Ocean. So obviously this is going to spike global prices on oil, but hey, you know, war is war. Over here, moving and leaving the Soviet Far East Command, we are going to go into the United States Pacific Command, and a little bit more is heating up here in the Pacific, obviously. They've redeployed some of their anti-submarine helicopters, but moved the bulk of their fleet, and in this case, the Dwight D. Eisenhower and her task force with USS Texas, into really close into the Pacific here. They brought the Chicago and the Houston up close to the Philippines right here. Keep an eye on things with the Taiwanese fleet. Basically, it's all one big super fleet right now, protecting interests in Taiwan. And I know China has had some desires. So maybe when the dust settles, China will be striking out against the Americans or their Taiwanese allies. Chinese deployment of their forces are still in P16, just off the coast of Zhengzhou. And that's basically the entirety of American forces. Just some redeployments in here. Not a lot's been going on for any attack or responses. The DEFCON markers have been slowly going up from 5 to 4 to 3 and so on until we probably get to DEFCON 1. That being said, just moving on, a brief summary with China. China has redeployed a lot of their forces to the north, and we can see that clear as day up here. We have a lot of early gen fighters redeployed. Pretty much over half their strength of their air force is in Beijing, or not Beijing, southern Manchuria, and the rest is in Beijing, in Zhejiang, with some redeployments up into eastern part of the country. But realistically, they have a lot to be worried about possible Soviet aggression on their northern border, and they're not going to take it on the chin, and I don't blame them. Indian forces here, once again, pretty much, I think the Indians as a minor or controllable minor right now, they did get the recruitment role, so they got 2 paramilitary symbolized by those chips, and their navy has grown. They finished their cruiser and whatnot, so obviously there's a mixture of Soviet and Indian forces here. So it's a sizable navy to check with this navy over here with the USS Enterprise, who's in the Indian Ocean currently right now. But you got to keep in mind too, Kula-class submarine, a Kula-class submarine, Kilo-class attack sub, plus the Indian Navy. What do we got here? Surrounded is that American Navy, plus a lot of the oil tankers here close to the Persian Gulf. So interesting fun fact. And on top of that, the Soviet Far East Navy has sailed down here just off the coast of South Vietnam. That's very sizable forces. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. And also Soviet Global Command, and I might have missed this, has redeployed a lot of forces here into Afghanistan, and possibly for a strike somewhere nice and juicy, maybe to help out their Indian comrades in Pakistan here, and really once again pincer China into an untenable position. But once again, the war is heating up. We are going to see a lot of development next turn. So keep your eyes peeled for turn 5.1. We might have a surprise for you for Warsaw Pact. Until then, guys, we'll talk soon, and enjoy the videos, and we will see you later.